is being focused on in this current government. Jesus Christ said a lot of things such as, sin no more, and things such as love your neighbor are things that we should embody in every single one of our public policy decisions. So Jesus is divine, and he would not fill out a ballot.
Okay. All right, thank you for answering my questions.
There are moments in politics when a single question tells you far more than a long speech ever could. Today is one of those moments. Charlie Kirk has spent years presenting himself as one of Donald Trump's strongest defenders. But during his latest visit to the UK, one simple question appeared to stop him in his tracks. The question wasn't about taxes, immigration, or the economy. It was much more personal and much harder to answer. Would Jesus vote for Donald Trump? Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. If you've been following this channel, you'll know we've covered several of Charlie Kirk's appearances in the UK recently. Time and again, he's found himself facing audiences that aren't simply accepting talking points at face value. Instead, he's been challenged with direct questions that force him to explain the reasoning behind his claims. And in several of those exchanges, he's looked noticeably uncomfortable. This latest encounter may be one of the most revealing yet. What starts as a calm conversation gradually builds toward a question that goes straight to the heart of Kirk's political and religious messaging. For years, he's argued that Christian values should play a major role in public life and has repeatedly defended Donald Trump through that lens. But when someone asks him to connect those beliefs with the actual teachings of Jesus, the conversation takes a very interesting turn. As you'll see, Kirk tries to navigate the question carefully, but the more he explains his position, the more complicated the discussion becomes. Whether you agree with him or not, it's clear this wasn't the kind of question that could be answered with a simple slogan or a quick applause line. So let's watch the exchange in full first. Pay close attention to how the discussion develops, because once it's over, I'll break down the key moments, explain what stood out to me, and share why I think this particular question ended up putting Charlie Kirk in a very difficult position.
You've spoken a little bit about your belief in the sanctity of life and the inviolable dignity of the human person. I take it that you accept evolution.
It depends what you mean by that.
Do you think we've evolved from primates?
I don't know.
Okay.
But I do believe in the biblical account of creation. I also acknowledge that there is an abundance of scientific research that shows adaptation. Species change is heavily inferred in the data. I don't know enough about it, but I believe the scriptures to be true. And you can be a theist and also believe in God-ushered evolution.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And so, of which I allow people much smarter than me to make determinations on that. It's completely irrelevant to my core theology, though.
Okay. Are you happy for me to proceed with the question,
Please,
though, on that basis?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah.
No, that's fine. So you're kind of not vaguely, but you seem generally happy with the idea that maybe evolution is true. I hope that that's the case. I mean,
I don't believe that. I think that
okay.
I'm not saying you said happy that evolution is true.
Well, not necessarily happy, but
that was the word you used, though, right?
Okay, fine. Willing to accept that based on the evidence, evolution is a fact.
No, I'm not saying it's a fact. I'm actually, again, I say I'm open to have my mind moved, and I look at the data, but I believe, given the abundance of equal data that atheists must reckon with, that there is a fine-tuning problem to our existence that I believe warrants that there is a God, intelligent life came from a God, and I believe the scriptures to be true. That in the creation account, there is an allowance to say that God created the heavens and the earth and allowed us to either evolve through species. I happen to believe, through a faith claim, that human beings are designed. What that means is designed over a long period of time or designed immediately. That's for people smarter than me to determine.
Fine. I suppose what I'm getting at is if you believe in the sanctity of life and that there is something fundamentally different between the life of, say, for instance, a human being and the life of an animal, does that not make that claim slightly arbitrary? What is personhood based in, if not? Oh, yeah. So do you see what I'm getting at?
Sort of. The scriptures say, though, that God created humans, male and female distinct. They're the only ones in Genesis 1:26, 1:27 to made in the image of God.
Right,
and
exactly.
So he called animals good, but they are not image bearers.
Okay,
but that word create is barach in Hebrew, and it's not clear whether or not that is created in an instant over a long period of time. And we as believers, I find no contradiction into saying that God could have created an instant, of which I would be pleased. I'll ask God when I get to heaven how this all unfolded. Or was it a process of adaptation and species change? Very smart Christians are on both sides of this issue. And so there's what we call in Christianity closed-hand theological issues and open-hand theological issues. Closed-hand issues would be like the resurrection of Christ, the Trinity, and then there's open-handed, which would be like eschatology or the Eucharist or the creation account. This one allows, given the verbiage, it could be either way.
Fine. I think just, I don't want to take up too much time then, but just kind of on that, you were talking a little bit about Christian values, and I'm intrigued by that. I get the sense that you're very much motivated by your faith. To what extent do you think Donald Trump embodies gospel values?
Yeah, so he reminds me very much of Samson in the Bible. Both had, you can laugh. How many of you guys actually know about Samson? Great hair. He was a man willing to fight for a cause greater than he, despite some of his own moral troublings and moral missteps. All throughout the Bible, from King David to others, there are plenty of Abraham. Moses murdered somebody. How many people know that? Moses murdered somebody. How dare you? You could say a lot. Donald Trump has never murdered anybody. But Moses is like the most revered man in Judaism. You know, he was a murderer in Egypt. He took someone aside and just slammed him in the head and actually had to flee all the way to Midian because of it. We're all flawed. We all have original sin. How do I reconcile what he's doing with gospel values?
Well, for instance, I mean, the gospel values to me would be, humility, compassion, forgiveness. Sure. Does he live according to those values, do you think?
I actually, at times, I will say, he's far more magnanimous than people will give him credit. None of us are able to fill all those values. I will say some values that I think he does fulfill. He is a truth teller. And the gospel says very clearly that telling of the truth is one of the most fundamental things, the spoken word. So I'm not going to spend time here defining every moral decision that Donald Trump has made or not made. I am equally a sinner as Donald Trump. We all are. We all fall short of the glory of God. But I will say that his willingness to rise to the occasion of something greater than he, to endure being shot and almost shot again and almost 700 years in federal prison, is one of the most courageous actions I've ever seen from a public elected official in the history of the West.
Do you think Jesus would have voted for Trump?
Do I think Jesus, first of all, Jesus intentionally didn't vote and did not care about the Roman guard. You remember he said, pay unto Caesar what is Caesar, render unto God's what is God. Do I think Jesus would love some of the stuff that Trump is doing?
It's a silly question, but I'm just,
No, I mean, fine. It's like, what did Jesus teach us? Jesus says, don't touch children. Okay, so he would love the fact that Donald Trump repealed Roe versus Wade. He would love the fact that child sex trafficking is being focused on in this current government. Jesus Christ said a lot of things such as, sin no more, and things such as love your neighbor are things that we should embody in every single one of our public policy decisions. So Jesus is divine, and he would not fill out a ballot.
Okay. All right, thank you for answering my questions.
Now, I don't know about you, but I thought that was a fascinating exchange. It took a little while to get there, but once the conversation shifted to the bigger question, whether Donald Trump reflects Christian values and whether Jesus would support him, that's when things became really interesting. In my view, Charlie Kirk was put in a difficult position. Earlier in the discussion, he emphasized that telling the truth is one of the core principles of Christianity. But when he was asked to reconcile that principle with his defense of Donald Trump, I don't think his answer fully addressed the question. Supporters will probably see his response as a reasonable defense. Critics will likely argue that he avoided the heart of the issue. That's why this debate keeps resurfacing. If you compare some of the values often associated with Jesus in the Gospels, love, forgiveness, humility, compassion for the vulnerable, with the way Trump's critics describe his public rhetoric and leadership style, it's easy to see why this remains such a controversial discussion. On the other hand, Trump's supporters point to policies they believe align with their Christian beliefs. Ultimately, that's a judgment viewers will have to make for themselves. Kirk also described Trump as a truth teller. Critics have challenged that characterization for years, pointing to numerous public fact checks of statements made during Trump's presidency. Whether you find those assessments persuasive or not, it's clear this remains one of the biggest points of disagreement surrounding him. For me, though, the biggest moment wasn't any particular answer, it was the question itself. You could almost feel the room pause because it forced a conversation that went beyond politics and into faith, values, and personal conviction. But those are just my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours. Do you think Charlie Kirk answered the question convincingly, or do you think he sidestepped it? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.